Welcome to the Know. I'm Brian.
I'm Ben.
It is no secret that Nintendo has used indie games to help beef up its game library, especially last year when its bigger first-party releases like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and Super Mario Party came out kind of toward the end of the year.
Yeah, needless to say, there's been a gold rush by indie devs to get their games onto the portable console. That's because, especially at first, it hit that sweet spot of a popular new console without a lot of games.
Yeah, those early years when it was just Breath of the Wild.
Yep,
and
now it's just an indie machine.
Yeah. Now, but Nintendo, they've definitely returned the love. They have rolled out the red carpet for indies in a way that it really hasn't for generations. It now regularly highlights indie games in its Nindy showcase with a mix of new games and older ports of well-received indie titles that might be new to console players.
Yeah, this is definitely a departure from the days of the Wii, when some indies complained that they were sometimes frozen out in favor of Nintendo's first-party games. Since then, though, Nintendo has said that it's learned its lesson.
And I think they have.
Yeah.
But how well are indie games doing on the Switch? We did some digging to find out if there really is a pot of gold at the end of the Switch rainbow.
Give me those Lucky Charms.
You like that?
Now, we don't have sales numbers on everything, but there are a lot of individual games to point to.
Yeah, so let's run a few of them down. Most recently, the publisher FDG Entertainment tweeted that the Switch is in another universe compared to its sales on other platforms.
As an example, they used their recent platformer, Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom, which came out for Switch, PS4, and for Xbox One in December.
Okay.
How did the Switch do? It outsold everything by a margin of 8-1.
Fuck.
Yeah.
FDG wrote, Nintendo Switch continues to amaze us. Not only does it bring so much joy with its original games, it's also the most profitable console business ever for us.
Yep, and then you got the Roguelike, Enter the Gungeon, which sold more than 75,000 copies on the Switch in 2 weeks, which developer Dodgeroll Games said surpassed all its expectations.
And then there's, yeah, that's a lot. And then there's Super Meat Boy, which is old enough to be in grade school at this point. It had a fantastic debut on the Switch despite its age. Team Meat tweeted that its first day sales on the Switch in 2018 came shockingly close to its debut on the Xbox 360 back in 2010.
I can only imagine
That's
the sequel's going to
crazy.
do even better.
Yeah.
A few more stats to throw out at you. SteamWorld Dig 2 sold 10 times as much on Switch as it did on Steam.
Another game from FDG, Blossom Tales, also sold more on the Switch than it did on Steam by a factor of 20.
Moving on, one of the all-time indie champs, Stardew Valley, has sold at least 1 million copies on the Switch, of course.
Yep.
And it passed that mark in less than a year. After the game's 1-year anniversary on the Switch, Stardew Valley creator Eric Barone thanked fans and said, having grown up as a huge Nintendo fan, seeing my game on the Nintendo Switch feels surreal, but also brings me a lot of joy.
I know some people who say their Switch is just a Stardew Valley machine.
I would believe it.
Yeah, but a lot of us did grow up with a Nintendo as one of our first consoles, so definitely a nostalgia factor at play here too.
The great Metroidvania game Hollow Knight sold 250,000 copies on the Switch in its first 2 weeks. And in the Switch's first year, 3 indie devs reported that the Switch versions of their games, Death Squared, Oceanhorn, and Wonder Boy, sold more on the Switch than all other versions combined.
Meanwhile, the platformer Celeste, which was one of the biggest games last year, sold the best on the Switch compared to every other platform.
In talking about the Switch's sales, its creator Matt Thompson told Destructoid, the Switch version of Celeste has sold the most, and that's what we were expecting. We feel like Celeste and the Switch are a perfect fit for each other.
That's interesting what he said, that they were expecting that now. So it's already like they're expecting it to do better. Some devs also say that the Switch's portability is a big part of why indies do so well there, because it lends itself to games with shorter play sessions.
Simon Jocelyn, creative director at indie studio The Voxel Agents, told Pocket Gamer that the form factor of the Switch was a big reason he wanted his games on the platform.
Yeah, he said, beyond the obvious advantages of outdoor mobility, within the home, it's handy that you can free up the main TV by unplugging and playing elsewhere in the house. Surprisingly, I play most of my games in handheld mode. On the developer side, the numbers simply make good business sense because players are spending.
Dan Menard, CEO at Double Stallion Games, said, for the Switch consumer, a $20 indie game feels like a great bargain. The mobile to TV use case that Nintendo has created is really compelling, and I've seen people rebuy games that they already own so they could take them on the bus or a plane with them. I did that with Celeste.
I'm one of those, yep, Dragon Quest builders, yep. Since the Switch also supports engines like Unity and Unreal, that makes it easier for a lot of developers also to port their games over. It might not be beefy enough to run a lot of AAA games like Red Dead Redemption 2, but the Switch is plenty powerful enough to run most indie games.
Yep, of course, given these kind of sales, tons of indies rush to get their games onto the Switch, and over the summer, Nintendo executive Susumu Tanaka said, "In the future, we are looking to release around 20 to 30 indie games on Nintendo Switch per week."
And that raised a lot of eyebrows.
Yeah.
That led a lot of people to worry that the Switch was going to get saturated very quickly at that rate.
And while the Switch eShop is definitely more crowded these days, the fact that a newer game like Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom is still selling well on the Switch proves that there's still gold to be made out there, even if it's just an indie game.
Yeah.
Even if they might be harder to get noticed nowadays.
Yes. But still, though, not every indie game is going to sell well just because it's on the Switch. Those days long gone. The developer of the indie RPG Cosmic Star Heroine said their game didn't sell as well on the Switch as it did on Steam, which it released last year.
Nintendo Everything quoted developer Zeboyd Games as saying that they had a big discoverability problem on the Switch.
They wrote, "We got an okay number of reviews, but yeah, we couldn't get Nintendo to mention the game anywhere. Real shame, since even a retweet from Nintendo probably would have given us a big boost in visibility. It's a good game, and I dare say a good percent of those million-plus people who bought Octopath Traveler would like our game if they knew it existed."
And that will be a big problem as the Switch goes into 2019. Oversaturation. The Gold Rush days are over now, so it'll be a bit harder for good games to rise to the top.
But given those sales numbers and the Switch's popularity, it's a very safe bet that we will see indie developers keep coming to the Switch for a long time to
Get
come.
that snowball effect going, you can make a lot
Absolutely.
of money.
Yep.
What do you guys think of the Switch's indie lineup? Is it your go-to console for indie games? I know it is for me. Let us know in the comments.
And for all your Switch news, be sure to like this video. If you're new around here, subscribe to The Know. Go to our website, theknow.tv.